Welcome back to the Fourth Way Podcast. Chapter 4 of Bernard Eller's The Simple Life. In, but not of. Earlier, we suggested that the Christian concept of the simple life cannot be equated directly with sheer rejection of the prevailing social order. We saw that neither Jesus' teachings nor his example could be forced into so simplistic a pattern. Yet certainly, both for Jesus and for us, the simple life does entail elements of a witness against the world and its ways. The matter will need to be made dialectical. It is this particular dialectic we propose to develop now. We already have noted some New Testament texts that deal with the subject, and we bring in some others. However, what is perhaps the best early Christian statement comes not out of the New Testament itself, but from a bit later in history, perhaps during the 2nd century. Even so, all the indications are that this text is a fair representation of the New Testament's own teachings. The document is a rare and little-noted fragment of an early Christian apology known as the Letter to Diognetus. Very little, if anything definite, can be said about who wrote it, when, where, or how, and we will use it then, not so much as the thought of a particular author, but more as an almost accidental peek into the culture of the early Christians and their practice of the simple life. Christians are not different from the rest of men in nationality, speech, or customs. They do not live in states of their own, nor do they use a special language, nor adopt a peculiar way of life. Whether fortune has given them a home in a Greek or foreign city, they follow local customs in the matter of dress, food, and way of life. Yet the character of the culture they reveal is marvelous, and it must be admitted unusual. They live, each in his native land, but as though they were not really at home there. They share in all duties like citizens, and suffer all hardships like strangers. Even foreign land is for them the fatherland, and every fatherland a foreign land. They marry like the rest of men and beget children, but they do not abandon the babies that are born. They share a common board, but not a common bed. In the flesh they are. They do not live according to the flesh. They dwell on earth, but they are citizens of heaven. They obey the laws that men make, but their lives are better than the laws. They love all men, but are persecuted by all. They are unknown, and yet they are condemned. They are put to death, yet are more alive than ever. They are paupers, but they make many rich. They lack all things, and yet in all things they abound. This passage is a beautiful example of dialectic, even if nothing else. The concluding line specifically, but also the tone of the whole, make it plain that the style of these Christians was a simple one. Their lives obviously were not centered upon material values. Regarding the relationship, then, between them and the society around them, it also is made plain that this style was obnoxious to those who observed it. They interpreted it as a threat to and a judgment against their own values. So much was this the case that we are told that the Christians actually were persecuted and killed in consequence. Nevertheless, and here comes the dialectic, it is also made clear that the Christian style was not purposely designed to irritate other people, or even willfully to demonstrate a difference and distance from them. Quite the contrary. We see these Christians making a deliberate effort to identify with the larger community. The entire first half of our passage points in this direction. The normative principle behind their action seems to be this: except where their allegiance to Christ clearly dictates otherwise, they feel a real obligation to be identified with the people and affiliated with the culture in which they find themselves. Nonconformity is not valued as an end in itself. The one end is that which we have been emphasizing all the way through: loyalty to Jesus Christ, and through him, to the kingdom of God. Obviously, at points this loyalty is going to show itself as nonconformity to the world. Yet even there, the loyalty rather than the nonconformity is the motive and goal of the action. Absolutely no value is given here to nonconformity apart from such an act of loyalty. Now, when the Christian, out of his loyalty to Jesus, does perform in a way that amounts to a rejection of the world's way, it is quite possible for the world, or at least some people in it, to see this as an expose of its own evil and consequently be motivated to a change of heart and of life. But it is God's business whether or not things do work out so. There's no evidence to suggest that Christian simplicity ever was meant as a strategy for protesting against the world or attempting to reform it. In a word, the validity of Christian simplicity is determined entirely by the good of that which it does conform, namely, the kingdom of God, rather than by the evil of that which it refuses to conform, even though God may choose to use that nonconformity as an injunction against evil. Or to put it again in the terms that form the true basis of our thought, set your mind on God's kingdom before everything else, and all the rest, including the condemnation and possible reformation of the world, will come to you as well. From this analysis, it should become apparent how different is the economy of Christian simplicity from the superficially similar simplicity of the contemporary counterculture. That movement, it seems quite apparent, is motivated almost exclusively by reaction, rebellion, protest, defiance against society, a society deemed to be essentially evil. Completely contrary to what we found in the Diognetus description, there now appears a conscious effort to discover and invent arbitrary symbols that can express and dramatize the stance of distancing and rejection. Whereas these early Christians were seeking out opportunities, Christianly permissible opportunities, for expressing their identity with their fellows of the larger society, the counterculture seeks out opportunities for expressing dissociation and contempt. Nonconformity is promoted as a good in and for itself. Behind this difference, of course, lies the fundamental discrepancy that the counterculture lacks a positive center. Because it has nothing integral or true upon which to focus in the positive, it has to orient itself simply as protest against the negative. And as much of a positive witness as the counterculture can muster is the questionable assertion that simplicity is more sensuously satisfying than luxury is. It needs to be said that the counterculture's rebellion toward simplicity does have sociological significance, and perhaps even a contribution to make in exposing the deep sickness of our sensate, materialistic, technique-dominated society. But how disastrous it would be to confuse this symptom of sickness with, or equate it to that Christian simplicity which is the cure of sickness, and that because it points to and is controlled by the one who is himself the great physician. A second passage from Diognetus leads us into a theological analysis of the simplicity that the first passage described. In a word, what the soul is to the body, Christians are to the world. The soul is distributed in every member of the body, and Christians are scattered in every city in the world. So Christians live in the world, but they are not of the world. The soul which is guarded in the visible body is not itself visible. And so Christians who are in the world are known, but their worship remains unseen. The flesh hates, and the soul acts like an unjust aggressor, because it is forbidden to indulge in pleasures. The world hates Christians, not that they have done it wrong, but because they oppose its pleasures. The soul loves the body and its members in spite of the hatred. So Christians love those who hate them. The soul is locked up in the body, yet it holds the body together. And so Christians are held in the world as in prison, yet it is they who hold the world together. Now admittedly, this author's doctrine of the soul is wide open to criticism, both on biblical grounds and on the grounds of modern psychology and anthropology. However, because neither he nor we have any interest in discussing the soul as such, this need present no difficulty. Our one concern will be to grasp his picture in order to understand what he is talking about, the Christian's relationship to the world. He does not envisage the soul, as many of us may, as an ethereal blob hidden somewhere within an individual. For him, the soul is an invisible, insubstantial body congruent with and contained within the person's material body. Further, the soul is by nature good and manifests a concern for the virtue and welfare of the person as a whole, whereas the physical body is interested only in its own sensual pleasure. As before, the author's prime concern is to establish the dialectic character of the relationship he is exploring. He achieves his most succinct statement of it, perhaps, in the sentence, "So Christians live in the world, but they are not of the world. He did not invent this idea, although he may have been the first to put it just this tersely. But in the Gospel of John, Jesus' high priestly prayer for his disciples includes each of the elements we have found here in Diognetus. But now I am coming to you, and I speak these things in the world, so that they may have my joy made complete in themselves. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask you to protect them from the evil one. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Sanctify them as the truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. This passage can help in interpreting and elaborating what the Diognetus author has said. He pointed us in the direction of giving the in-the-world pole of the dialectic proper attention, along with the not-of-the-world pole. But Jesus makes it specific that his prayer is precisely not that his disciples should be taken out of the world. Yet truly, the evidence suggests that what we have called countercultural simplicity does represent an attempt to get out of the world. No, not out of the natural world, of course, but out of the world of human society. The prevalence of drug use in this culture is perhaps the clearest indicator that this is the motivation involved. But Jesus, too, is talking about the human world rather than the natural world. The final sentence of our John text makes this plain. To say that Christians be in the world implies much more than the simple-minded observation that in the world is where we happen to be, and that we ought not to try and fight the fact. Far from being merely an unavoidable fact of our existence, Jesus insists that Christians be in the world because he himself sent them into the world just as God sent him into the world. The Christian way of being in the world, then, is the way of conscious and deliberate religious commitment rather than the way of automatic and inevitable happenstance. And thus voluntary association in the world of men can be the only possible intention behind Jesus' words. It goes without saying that God sent Jesus into the world for no other purpose than to love, serve, suffer with, and suffer for the men he found there. It follows indubitably that Christians are sent into the world with the same assignment. Now, it obviously is impossible to communicate love and concern for one's fellow man unless one is willing, at the same time, to communicate the desire to understand, feel for, become involved, and even identified with him. In that regard, Jesus' own ministry was so effective that the New Testament can say of him, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin." The calling of the Christian impels him to be working every bit as hard at being in the world as at being not of it. In fact, just as soon as one of these tasks is disregarded, the other loses its validity at the same time. Many Christians have become so good at being in the world that there no longer is any evidence of their being not of it. That's worldliness, and that's bad. But the situation isn't helped when those of the counterculture overreact to that hypocrisy, become so scrupulous about being not of the world that they fail any longer to be in it. That's self-righteous contemptuousness. That's bad too. And it is a hypocrisy of its own sort. The Christian's not of the world simplicity will offend people. Both Jesus and the Diognetus author make this clear. Yet the Christians love these very same people, knows that he is one of them, and wants to be known as one of them. Even though they find his action offensive, it is not that he wanted it to offend them. He was not out to bug them and takes no satisfaction in the fact that they got irritated. In this regard, one of the most questionable assumptions behind the counterculture and its Christian camp following is the idea that one helps people by getting them riled up and pushed out of shape, or that any of us is wise and righteous enough to administer such therapy. Now, if at times, as I fully believe is the case, a person's becoming offended does turn out to be the occasion for achieving new insight and is coming to repentance, still, this is an outcome that had better be left in the hands of God. The Christian, it seems clear, is called to express his love of the neighbor in a more direct and unambiguous way, in a way that the neighbor himself will recognize as love. Christians love those who hate them, and it is these Christians who hold the world together. This is what the Diognetus author tells us, rather than that they are those who seek to work at tearing it apart in hopes of getting it all together. And so Christian simplicity must at all times be dialectical, and if its practitioner is to be in the world even while not of it, he must find the way to differ from the world without telling it to go to hell at the same time. Like I said in the last chapter, this chapter, along with the last one, are, I think, my two favorite chapters in this work from Eller. And in this chapter in particular, because he quotes from one of my favorite pieces, which is the letter to Diognetus. And in this chapter, Eller is continuing from his last thought, and he's addressing something that always makes me a little bit wary, which is the idea that the heart is what matters. And like, in a sense, I know that that's true, but that's used for so many types of injustices. I mean well, I'm doing this for the greater good. I'm doing this for their good. And a lot of times people can say that in their heart they're doing a bad thing, a harmful, a hurtful thing, but they're doing it for good. And so I see it used as an excuse a lot. But Eller continues to emphasize the fact that he is working with a dialectic here, which just means that he's dealing with two kind of polar sorts of ideas. And if you just go with one, you're going to get a backlash and you're going to be like, whoa, that's a little much. But if you go completely the other way, people are going to feel that as well. And so there's this tension between these two truths that hold together as true. G.K. Chesterton, in his book Orthodoxy, I think gives some really great examples of what might be considered dialectics of sorts. He talks about Christian virtues and how, whereas a lot of times the world will try to neuter virtues or, discard one aspect of a virtue, he's like, Christianity, it takes both virtues and takes them to the extreme. So it takes both poles and takes them to the extreme. So, for example, you talk about something like courage. Courage is something where you have to have a reckless abandon of your life, like you've given your life up as completely lost, but at the same time, that gives you the strength to fight with the utmost vigor and desire to overcome. It's kind of, well, if you've given your life up, why are you fighting so hard, right? You've got these two seemingly extreme opposites, but when you put them together, you get the strongest virtue. And Chesterton gives some great examples. I think grace is one of those things where it's like, I can view myself as a sinner to just like the utmost extent, recognizing how far I've deviated from God's purpose and desire, but at the same time, like my worth and my value. So Chesterton, highly recommend his book Orthodoxy, and you can see kind of these dialectical ideas. But that's what Eller's doing, and so when he's talking about the importance of the heart, I know that behind that, Eller has told me he's not just swinging to one pole. Like, this is going to be balanced with the other things that he says. So you got to keep that in mind when you're reading any part of Eller here, that there are these two poles you need to have in tension. So, yeah, in this one he goes through the letter to Diognetus and just shows that, Christian simplicity, right? A lot of people are going to say, well, what, do you want me to be like the Amish? Well, maybe. Maybe that would be a good thing for you. Maybe like the rich young ruler, that's what your heart needs. But also somebody might say, well, now I'm excused. Eller excuses me to now basically live how I want because riches are not a sign of not living simply. And so that's not at all what Eller's saying. He's saying, look at the Christians. They're so different, like looking at the letter to Diognetus, they're so different from the people around them, yet at the same time, they're not seeking to be different, right? They don't accentuate their differences. They try to live among the people and be like the people, yet they have these significant distinctions where necessary. And so that's what Eller's trying to point out as far as simplicity goes. He's like, it's not just going and getting rid of everything and living in a Bruderhof community or something. I mean, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's not the only version of simplicity. At the same time, you could have a lot of objects, a lot of wealth, perhaps, but your life might not really look that way either. But just because somebody else's looks that way doesn't mean that you can necessarily judge them for that. There's certainly fruit that we can look at and we can question, and we can guide brothers and sisters to be reflective. But we need to be very careful about the way that we're judging, and our tendency towards swinging towards each pole, but also our tendency to judge what we think is one pole or the other, because we think that our judgment is accurate. So taking a look at the letter to Diognetus is great. I loved it. And I think this chapter really highlights the aspect of dialectic and how that's so important for us as we assess our own lives and how to live. So that's it for this chapter. Come back next week for chapter 5.
That's all for now. So peace, and because I'm a pacifist, when I say it, I mean it. This podcast is a part of the Kingdom Outpost Network. Please check out the links below to find other great podcasts and content related to nonviolence and kingdom living.